Hey there, Chad here for the AI Content Dojo, and welcome to how to use AI to write efficiently, context in Shortly AI. So context is kind of that content that kind of gets used to get the most from AI. It's that stuff that the tools are sending over to the OpenAI GPT-3 API in order to get back the content that you want to increase your writing efficiency and so on. So understanding this context is probably the most important skill that you're going to need to become efficient with Shortly AI in particular. And in this guide, I'm going to explain everything you need to make the most of your AI writing assistant and to be more productive than you could ever imagine. Before we dive into all the cool little tricks, let's just go over some of the components of the UI. So the truly amazing thing about Shortly really is that it's so straightforward, but it's also just kind of subtly complex. You know, it's got like the interface is very, it's just like opening up a blank canvas document, you know, and there's not a lot of tools or things to get in the way. You simply get to write your heart out. And when you need the AI assistance, it's there. It's just under the surface. And the one thing that gives you total control over it are your words and how you use them in the article brief, the title, the content area, and inside of the special commands that you're going to find inside of Shortly. Now, this is something that is unique to Shortly only. No other AI writing app gives you this level of control and flexibility. And on one hand, it's very powerful. On the other hand, if you don't know what you're doing, maybe you don't quite get what you want out of Shortly, and that's what I hope to resolve in this guide. Let's go over the article brief and title first. Now, the article brief tells your AI assistant kind of what the type of content is that you want and the topic that it's about. Providing a detailed topic-rich one is very important. For example, you might write, please write an article about working from home. And it's not very topic rich, is it? Instead, you might use something like, please write an article about the difficulties of dealing with distractions while working from home. Or you could go even further, please write a creative article about the difficulties of dealing with distractions while working from home with young children. Now, the important part of this is that the article brief is kind of the anchor of your content, the context that's going to be sent over to the AI. When you click that Write For Me button, the article brief along with the title are always sent. So it's always going to be used. So it does have a lot of influence over the results that you're going to get back from the AI. I'll explain a little bit more of why I'm emphasizing always here. There is something that will change that a little bit later. Now, the title kind of acts in the same way as the article brief, except it's just a title. And the best practice that I found for using it is to kind of set the overall topic. So in the case of the example I just used, I might say something like working from home, overcoming distractions from your little ones. It's really kind of saying the same thing, maybe slightly different words, but it'll kind of set the stage and then help your AI find or come back with what you want. So before we move on though, I really want to emphasize that the article brief and title are almost always sent to the AI. And then a little bit later, I'll explain why. And there's times when it isn't. Now, the content area, this is where you're writing all your content, right? The paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs that come together to form your article. And this is where it really kind of starts to become interesting because, you know, the article brief, the title, and the content that you're writing are what gets sent over to the AI when you hit that Write For Me button. First, only the content that is above the line where you are, like where your cursor is or where you're currently typing when you hit that Write For Me button is used. Only the stuff above it. Nothing below that is used at all. You could be on paragraph 2 of 30 and none of the following 28 paragraphs will have any effect on the output. And that's really all you need to know about the content area. Next, you need to be aware of patterns. Now, GPT-3 loves patterns. If you start a bullet list, the AI will start to return bullets. And this can be a benefit and a detriment. On one hand, You can harness, this power, to enable some really interesting scenarios. If you haven't seen my video on the AI inception that I did, where the AI is creating AI to create the commands, it's really kind of crazy. But for example, you might be looking for headline ideas for your topic, and you want the AI to produce a list so that you can go through the list and find the headline that you want to use for your topic. Well, if you start like leading the AI, you'll get your list, and you could probably get a kickstart from the instruct command actually. Other times you might become trapped in a pattern when you don't want to be, particularly if you're in a really long article and you're quite a bit down inside of it, and the AI is producing stuff that kind of seems to follow a pattern, but you don't want that pattern. The way to recognize that is if it keeps returning that, even when you don't want it or don't expect it, look above it. The area above it might contain some kind of a pattern that the AI is catching on to. And then, if you try and fix that up, that might get you out of that trap and back to creating content. Okay. So that's the normal sort of way that context works. Now we're going to go over what happens inside of the commands, the slash commands. And there's a couple of different ones based on the commands you're using. So context inside of the refined commands, I call them refined commands. They're the ones that are like shorten, rewrite, and expand. I call them refined commands because they're used on the existing text that you have in your document to make refinements to them. Now these commands have a very special context. Only the content inside of the square brackets of the command are used. Nothing else. No content in the article, no article brief, no title, just the square bracketed text only. So for this reason, you need to be careful. For instance, if you try to do slash expand on just best parks, the only thing that the AI has to work with is best parks. So you can imagine that if your boss gave you some kind of a writing assignment and said, hey, write about best parks, be a little difficult, wouldn't it? Because you're like, give me a little bit more instruction, some context, that boss might have any number of ideas in their head for what they really want. But without good instructions, you're left to write just about whatever you come up with, isn't it? So be mindful of this. And if you're in a situation where you're trying to expand upon something inside of your content, go in there and kind of add some topic-rich keywords just to make sure that you're not leaving the AI kind of out to dry. So for instance, with the best parks, you might put something like the best parks with a view in New York City, something like that. It'll give the AI something to work with and probably give you back the content that you can actually use. All right, now let's go to the instruct command because it has its own special context too. So this is where it actually really gets kind of interesting because it's the thing that makes, I want to say that instruct is probably one of the things that makes it Shortly so special. And it's literally called instruct because you can imagine it as if you turn to your AI assistant and you're giving it instructions to get the content that you want. And the real power behind it is a little bit in how the context works with it. So for the instruct command only, right? Only the command that is above it in the content area and within the square brackets is used. The instruct command does not use the article brief and title at all. Now, can you imagine what's so special about this? No? What if you did something like /instruct, give me some questions about the above? Where maybe you already have a paragraph or two above it and you just want to get some questions about it. Maybe you wrote a paragraph about your new product and you're curious what questions that people might come up with about that product. Shortly can give those to you. It's pretty crazy. Or maybe you could even write a conclusion about the above. The point is that the instruct command gets a ton of its flexibility from the fact that it does know or it is aware of the content above it. So you can really explore and experiment and try some really interesting things to get some content out of it that, sometimes honestly, it might really kind of just blow your mind. You just, wow, that sometimes Shortly can feel like it's just way too smart. And yeah, it's really cool. I really highly recommend playing around with Instruct and seeing what kind of cool things you can get from it. Now, there are times when you need to kind of control that context a little bit. I call it the context cutoff ruler. It's a special command. It's like a triple slash that will cut off the context at that point where you type the triple slash. I don't think Shortly calls it that, but I like to call it the context cutoff ruler because it kind of makes sense for what it does, right? Now, it's useful for a couple of reasons. One is if you find yourself trapped in that pattern I was talking about before. If the content above where you are in your article seems to have a little bit of a pattern to it and you no longer want to be in that pattern, just use triple slash to break out of it. Two, if the topic of the content above the current point is different or even slightly different than the content that you're trying to write now, you don't want that content that's above where you are writing to interfere with the content that you're writing. So triple slash can cut that off. And finally, one really interesting use of it is that you can use the cutoff ruler to isolate the instruct command from the content above it. For instance, triple slash, then slash instruct. Please write some persuasive bullets about Birdie, comma, my revolutionary new backyard bird feeder. In this case, since there's the triple slash there, cutting off the context from above, instruct only, at this point, only has the context of what is inside of those square brackets. And I want to explain something extra here. Birdie is obviously a fake, not real product. Well, I guess it could be a real. I never really checked. In my example here, Birdie is not a real product, or the product is something that I created. There's no way the AI itself has any idea of what this product is. And therefore, I need to tell it what my product is. So you can give it the name and then tell it, Think about that whenever you're using the instruct command. If you're writing about something that there's no way the AI would know about it, provide a little context and explain it, and then the AI will create something really cool for you. Okay, now that you know what all the various context points are and how you can even control them, there's one type of thing, or is one type more important than the other? Sorry. Now, the weights of the article brief and title versus the content is something I get asked quite a bit. Like, does this weigh more? Or does this count more than this? And I just want to say right away, none of the context has more weight than the other. It's all the same. They all work in concert with each other. But there is something kind of interesting to know if your article gets very long. The article brief and title are always sent when you click the Write For Me button. But if you recall, so is the content that is above your current point where you're writing in your article. But there's a catch, because there's a limit to how much context that Shortly can send over to the AI. The content above your current position in your article might get truncated. So for instance, if you were 2,000 words into a long article and clicked Write For Me, the article brief and title are definitely going. A large amount of the content will also be used, but the top of it could be shaved off to fit the limit. I hope that makes sense. So I guess in a small way, the article brief and the title have a tiny bit more importance because they're always sent, but they don't actually have any extra weight in what will be returned. So with that in mind, there is a little bit more I want to tell you about this, about the article brief and the title. Is you can change it at any point when you're writing. Now, it might sound weird saying that because it might seem kind of obvious to you, but there are people who think that once they've written that article brief and the title, they have to stay. It has to stay that same thing the whole time they're writing their content. And it's not. That's not true. And since the article brief and the title are definitely going to be used when you hit that Write For Me button, they're actually kind of important for you to tweak as you move through your article. As you start getting farther in, you might start off with a very general article brief, like please write about the best parks with a view in New York City, but update it later in your article when you're writing about something more specific. But the main takeaway is that you can change these. They're not static. Now, don't forget about the power of expand. Now, this is just kind of a trick, almost like a secret weapon. So when you're writing and you're deep into a long article and you need a quick definition of something maybe, or content completely outside the scope of the content that's around where you are, there's a couple of ways you can handle this. One is with the power of expand. Now, if you recall, it's one of the refined commands, and so the only context that is used is what is inside of those square brackets of the command. So it doesn't matter what's around it. Nothing will interfere. So you could do something like /expand the definition of sushi. That should give you the definition of sushi, even if all the stuff around it was something else about sushi or whatever you were writing about. It would not interfere. And of course, the other way you could handle this is if you combine the /, the cutoff ruler, with the instruct command. You could do / instruct, please define sushi. And that would get probably roughly the same result as you'd get from expand. Now, technically, I guess expand is more about trying to take a topic or something and add more content to it. Whereas instruct is more like you literally turn to your assistant and say, hey, give me the definition of sushi, please. Okay, so that's all the context and stuff inside of Shortly. There's one more thing that will help you get the best content, and that's the granular controls. I'm not going to go really in depth on this because I do have a video dedicated just to these controls, but the idea is that within the instruct command, you can use pluses and minuses before the keyword, and that will help you either get the content or the output that you want or don't, right? I should say that words will or won't be used in the content based on how you use these. So for instance, inside of /instruct, please define sushi +++ Japanese would mean please make sure that the word Japanese is used in the output. And then this is --. It's getting blurred together by the website's code. But that is actually --, which means don't let the word wasabi appear in the output. And that just gives you just a little bit more control. So you might use it if the AI is giving you back content that is pretty close to what you want, but maybe you just kind of like, well, I wish this word wouldn't appear, and then maybe this word is more important, so please make sure that one is. You can use these controls to do exactly that. And that's it. Now you have all the tools that you need to get anything that you want out of the AI and be really efficient and write fast. Now, how do you do that? You dance and you ask. So in Shortly, that really kind of means dancing and asking is what I mean by that is, I know it sounds strange, but by dance, I mean that you write a little bit, maybe a sentence and a half or so, and then you hit that write for me button to let the AI finish your thought. And you do this back and forth until your article is complete. That's the dance. And every once in a while, when you want something more specific, this is the ask. That's when you use the instruct command. You turn to your AI partner and ask for a specific type of content. And essentially, to write really long form content, whether that's a 4,000 word blog post for your website or a 70,000 word book, you dance and ask your way to the finished work. That's it. There's no secret. Lots of experimentation might happen. You need to use these commands and get comfortable with them. So at first it might feel like you're having a difficult time, but as you get used to using the dance and the ask, you're going to start coming up with some really amazing content. And that's a wrap. I hope you found this guide helpful, and go over it as many times as it takes for you to really understand how this context works, because it's really vital for you to get exactly the content that you want from the AI and begin working efficiently. Okay, let's jump over into Shortly for a second. I want to show off a couple of things. So you can see over here in the article brief, nice topic rich. It's about an article, it's about a product that's birder. In this case, I don't mean birder, I mean birdie. It's about Birdie. It's a revolutionary new, backyard bird feeder with a camera and all that kind of stuff. Of course, Shortly would have no idea what that is, but it does now because I told it what it is. That's important if you're talking about something that, the AI would never have any idea about. And then context in Shortly is just me making sure that you're aware of. That's what I'm just playing around with it. So this is going to in a sense, interfere. If I was really trying to write an article about birdie, this would interfere with it. Don't do that. Change this to something about your actual article. Okay, so Instruct, remember, it has the ability to see the content above it. So birdie is our revolutionary new backyard bird feeder, and I want to get some persuasive bullets about it. I could /instruct, write some persuasive bullets, and I could put inside of here about birdie, our revolutionary new. But why would I do that? I've already got the content there. I can do /instruct, and I just run this command. I'm going to hold down Shift Command Enter to run it and keep the command there. And I should get back some nice little bullets. Look at that. Look at that. I guess some interesting persuasive bullets about it, and I could maybe use these in a landing page or something like that. It's very cool, right? That's pretty awesome. All right, so now we're getting down here, and I want to show off the /expand. Right, so we're a few paragraphs in. In fact, we've even got a /instruct in here. It would get in the way if I was just trying to use write for me, but I want to write about the best parks. Actually, I don't really want to, but what I'm trying to show you is that you should probably add a little bit more context, because what's it going to give me? Well, the best parks of what? Okay, Versailles. Okay. Oh, it actually said something about New York. That's lucky. But you can see that it's just going to try, right? It's just like, okay, I don't know what you really want, but I'm going to talk about parks. Whereas here, in the next one, it should be something about parks with a view in New York City. Wow. That's pretty interesting. Battery Park, okay. I don't know. I guess it's trying to say that it's going to start a brief list. Interesting. Anyway, that's one of the things that you can get with expand, is that it's in the middle. The expand command only has the context that's within those square brackets, and so you can use it when you're in the middle of your content like that. Here's another example. Remember how I said that if you're trying to write about something that's different from the content around it, the definition of sushi is definitely nothing about the birds and stuff around, or birdie, the bird feeder, and things like that. But it should give me a definition of sushi, because an expand only uses the square brackets as context. So the article brief and all that stuff has no influence over it. Now the same thing can be said about this, because check it out. The / right here is cutting off the context. And so this instruct command only sees what's inside of the square brackets. If I took that away, it might act kind of weird. But with / there, it should give me the definition of sushi as well. I wonder if it'll give me the same one. Nope. Oh, it's giving me some other information about it. Let me go back. Run that thing again. I should have just used redo, but I used Control Z. Well, there you go. And so that's kind of my point, is when you're in the middle of doing this, you're going to want to do the dance. Let me just cut this off, and we'll say, here's an example of what the dance looks like. What's more, birdie comes complete with 2 unique patents, including a patent-pending wild bird seed zinger. Birdie is lightweight and easy to use. Birdie's unique. Let's take that off, and let's dance with the AI. I've led it a little bit. I said birdie's unique, and let's write. Let's see what we get. There we go. And we just keep getting more and more about our product. And you just keep doing that dance, and every once in a while when you need something else, you use Instruct to get that content specific to your needs. And you'll end up with an amazing product at the end that you can post on your website or use through your brochures and things like that. Or whatever your writing needs are, Shortly can do it. And that's one of the main reasons why that I personally believe that Shortly is the best AI writing tool on the market right now, simply because of all this flexibility you have and the power of this Instruct command right here to give you whatever you need quickly. And so that's it for this guide. If you liked it, please subscribe, share, like, comment, and if you go down to the show notes, I'll have a link to this guide. Also, where you can get Shortly if you don't have Shortly already, and the AI Content Dojo Facebook page or Facebook group, where you can participate and ask questions, and the ninjas in that group will help you out, or myself as well, and help you write more or get more fluent with Shortly. And that's it for this guide. Take care.